This is JD with Wildwood Digital Media. Today we're going to be going a bit more in depth with keyframes. I'm going to show you how to stretch keyframes, move keyframes, how to ease keyframes using Easy Ease. First, let's go to New Composition. Doesn't matter what resolution, it's easier on your system if you choose 1080. We'll make this 5 seconds, that's fine. Click OK. Now we have a blank canvas here, and we have transparency on, which we can toggle over here. And let's go ahead and pretend we're going to build a lower thirds. And for that lower thirds, we're going to need a rectangle. Go ahead and click up here on our shape options, and we'll hold Alt and we'll click through the shapes until we get to the rectangle tool. We can also hit Q to get the rectangle tool. Now, let's go ahead and click in the lower corner and drag ourselves a rectangle. I definitely don't like this color. I don't like the shape, etc. But we can change all of those things. This is a beginner's class, beginner tutorial. So let me show you how to do that. First, we're going to click on our arrow key up here, and we can grab any of the points on a rectangle and we can move them. That's about the width I want. And then as far as color, we're going to go ahead and Alt click until we get a gradient. And I'm going to drag the gradient as well to shift it. The end point will be at the end, and then we'll shift the start of the gradient towards the end as well. So we just get a little bit of a gradient. And then we're going to double click it, and we're going to click on our first color. Actually, we'll stick with that. That's fine. I'm going to find a closer color for our end color. So we'll pick a blue. We'll pick a slightly more vibrant blue. So then we have a gradient that goes from a light blue to a more vibrant, darker blue. Click OK. And now we have a gradient. Under the lower corner here, click over into our contents. You'll now see our rectangle. We'll open that up, and we'll open up our transform. And then under transform, we're going to go for skew. And we'll go and we'll twist it a little bit. We'll twist it to 27. That looks great. And then we'll position it just so we lose that portion. And then we'll position it down just a little bit. So now it looks like a proper lower thirds. It might be a little bit big for some instances, but it doesn't really matter. We're just getting the idea of how to create a shape, and then we'll keyframe it. Now for this, the easiest way to get a drop shadow underneath this to get some depth is to go over into your right hand side when you have all panels selected, and click on Effects, click on Drop Shadow, and we will just drop the drop shadow on it. And we need, that's under perspective. As you can see, I have a bunch of additional effects, additional plugins. For you, you want the one under perspective, and you can drop it here, or you can drop it right on the object itself once it's selected. We have it selected. Let's just change that a little bit under effects. We'll go for distance. We'll make distance 10. And then we'll make softness, we'll make that 20. There, we have a drop shadow. And we have the border of a lower thirds that can fly into the screen and then fly off the screen. So let's go ahead and hide all that. Go back to contents, and we're back under transform. By the way, there are keyboard shortcuts for almost all of these things. If you're like me, you will forget a lot of them, except for the ones you use all the time. So one of the things I like to do is keep going back and forth to keyboard shortcuts and try and practice using just one or two of them so I ingrain it. Because if you look over them one time, it's not enough. Okay, we have our object here. Let's go ahead and keyframe it. Our starting position, we can take our selection tool, which is V, go ahead and drag this the whole way off. This will be our starting position. We want to drag as close as possible without visualizing it at all. Go ahead and hit our little icon down here that looks like a stopwatch for keyframes. We've added a keyframe. We made sure our playhead was at 0. So now we can see our keyframe here. We'll go out a little bit further, go to 10. We're going to go down here to our X coordinate, which is at -1500. We're at 10 frames now on our playhead, and we're going to drag it over till we can see almost all of it except the back corner, which we don't want. And now let's play that little section. We can also drag our lower slider here to just play this little section. And now we have a lower third that comes into frame. Let's go ahead and add another keyframe right here. We'll add it at, we're at 10. Let's go ahead and add it 20. Now you'll notice what happens, as I covered in the last video, is we now have two identical keyframes, -501. That way anything between frame 10 and frame 20 is going to stay in the exact same spot. Because the lower thirds, we want it to come in, stay, then go out. So now we'll go to 1 second, and we will drag off the screen. It will generate a keyframe for us. That's just about, there's a little bit of drop shadow we can see. There we go. Okay. So let's play that. We'll go ahead and drag the lower slider so we can see the whole thing. In, out, in. Okay. Now, obviously that looks terrible because I'm going to show you a few things here. Number one, we want to stretch out our keyframes. Go ahead and select your keyframes. They'll be blue when you select them. Hold the Alt key and drag. Our starting frame is at 0. I've decided I want this to be 3 seconds long. Now let's play it. And we'll drag our lower playhead to be 3 seconds. Great. Now, not actually great, but better. Okay, so the fly in is too fast. So right now it's taking us 30 frames or 1 second. So all we need to do is drag that keyframe that tells us when we're the whole way in. Let's drag it to 15. And let's drag the fly out to, let's make it pretty quick, 20. So it'll be a little bit slower in than out. You can see that this distance is 15 frames. This distance is, I don't have it quite on, yeah, I do have it quite on 20, 10 frames. So in, out. 4 keyframes, and instead of moving them in a linear fashion that is the same speed in, let's make it a bit more dynamic, a bit more interesting. What we're going to do is we're going to be using the graph editor, which you'll find right here. And to show you our options, I'm going to click off of that layer, then just select these 2 keyframes and right click on them, go to Keyframe Assistant, and then Easy Ease. You will notice you can also hit F9. Now let's go ahead and select all 4 of these keyframes on this position parameter, and let's see what has happened, what we changed, because we just turned on Easy Ease for these 2, but we did not turn on Easy Ease for these 2, and you can tell because these are diamonds. This is an hourglass icon. Click on it, and you'll see here this is a graph type, and we have a few different types. This one is the speed graph. You can also do a value graph. But we're going to start with the speed graph. And with the speed graph, what you're going to notice is this is how it originally looked. This is how it looks now. We have a nice parabolic curve. What does that mean for you? What it means is when this object comes in, we're at 0 frames, it actually starts very slow and we can measure our speed in pixels per second. And in this case, it just a few frames in, it's at 900 and some odd pixels per second. Then a few more frames in, it's going 3000 pixels per second. So it ramps up its speed, and then it ramps down its speed as it comes to its resting place. Keyframe 1, keyframe 2, keyframe 3, keyframe 4. Now what you'll notice is we didn't touch these two at all. So when it exits the frame, it's going to go an exact 5,400 pixels per second the whole time. It doesn't speed up or slow down. If you're in a car and you're going to accelerate, your car does not go in a linear speed. That's not how things in the real world go. So people notice these things, and it doesn't have as much organic feel. It doesn't have as much pop. It's not as visually appealing when it's flat like this in linear. So this is preferable the way we have it, which is automatic. It's easy ease is the effect in After Effects. Now we could select points, and we could utilize these tools over here. We could do the same thing. I don't know why you would, because they make it so easy to use easy ease shortcut. And then once you have easy ease, you can modify it by using your selection tool up here or hitting V on your keyboard. Then you click on keyframe, and your keyframes are down here on this line. And what we'll do is we have these handles, and the handles allow us to change the ramp up speed. So we can make it go really slow on the way in and then go really fast by dragging these handles. And basically what I will do is I will make it slow, 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 extremely fast. And then let's see what that looks like. You'll see it looks different, even though it's very, very short. We're talking here 15 frames, that's half a second, but it's going to look much more dynamic. Now we can select these keyframes. We can do a whole bunch of options over here manually. The easiest thing to do is just hit F9 on your keyboard, and we've just turned it to easy ease. Here we have the normal standard one. Let's see how it exits. It's got a render, so it's a little slow. Give it a second. Pardon my Mac. This is, by the way, the downside of Macs, is the hardware. It's integrated very well, but sometimes it's not as fast as the newer GPUs by NVIDIA. And there's our effect. Now, again, we have our selection tool by hitting V on our keyboard, and we can click on either of these keyframes, grab the handles, move them how we want. One popular thing is to move them both in, and you'll create a very steep slow in, peak, then slow out, and we'll preview that. And there you go. That is your graph editor. And again, we're in the speed graph. And just to show you the value graph, which we're not going to be utilizing right now because it's not that useful for what we're doing. If we were to have done this on transform for the whole layer, we could have split our position up by going to separate dimensions, because we're only modifying the X dimension. And you can do some useful overshoots using the value graph, and I'll explain that in a second here. Because if we go to value graph, you can see our values, and we'll click back here, position. It's also very important when you have these, if you click on the wrong thing, you'll be like, oh, nothing is changing, but you have to make sure your position is selected. And here we can see just the values of what we have. We're starting at minus 1,500 is our X coordinate off the screen. It's coming on the screen, and it's going to get the whole way up to where we want it position-wise at minus 515 pixels. And again, we can hover our mouse over and see that. And it just shows you the trajectory of your object and the values. And then if you change this, if you click on it and you move it, what you're going to end up doing is moving the whole object. Watch. And you move the object. if you move these elements here. And that's that. One other note is you can copy keyframes where it makes sense. It doesn't make sense in a lot of instances because in this case, our numbers here don't correspond with anything else. This is a -1000 number, but you can. So suppose you have a single parameter like skew, and skew is at 27, and you keyframe that. If there was another object you created, you can copy and paste those keyframes. Let me show you how to do that. We're going to go ahead and click on stopwatch. We have created a keyframe here. We'll create another one randomly. And again, as soon as we change the value, as long as we have moved our playhead, we will create another keyframe automatically. We can then select those keyframes, copy them, Command C, and anywhere we have a single number, make it easy for you, by clicking off that layer, create a rectangle right here. We'll go to rectangle. This has nothing done to it, and select skew. If we have our playhead here, it's going to paste them here, so it'll look slightly different, and we've pasted them here, and then it's going to get the same thing going. So you can copy and paste keyframes as well, if that makes sense for you. It might if you have an object that you need to replicate many times and you don't have a plugin to do that for you. That can help you. And that is it for keyframes for now. We'll check back later with some more topics, including mats. If you found any of this content useful, please like or subscribe, comment if you have particular topics you'd like to see covered. Thanks.